Robert descended the rust-covered stairs of Outpost Kepler 7, his footsteps echoing through the abandoned facility. For 117 years, this desert research station had sat dormant, ever since Earth fell silent and stopped sending supply ships. He was the last human here, the final maintenance worker on a world that nobody remembered anymore. The Archeans had arrived 2 centuries ago, declaring Earth's colonies inefficient. They colonized the galaxy with their sleek, emotionless technology and their cold efficiency. Humans were scattered, ignored, or enslaved. But this outpost had simply been forgotten, left behind with an aging mechanic and one final directive: keep the terraforming machine operational just in case someone came back. Robert had maintained the machine for over a century, alone with his thoughts and the endless red sands that stretched across the horizon. He was 160 years old now, kept alive by the station's medical systems, waiting for someone who would never come. The medical chamber had kept him from dying, extending his life far beyond what nature intended. Every day was the same. He would wake up, check the machines, walk through the empty corridors and watch the sunset over the desert. The silence was heavy and thick, like a weight pressing down on his shoulders. He had not heard another human voice in so long that he sometimes forgot what his own voice sounded like. The station was a marvel of old human engineering. It had been built when Earth still had hope, when humanity still believed they could terraform other worlds and create new homes among the stars. The main facility stretched deep underground, protected from the harsh desert climate above. Solar panels covered the surface, still collecting energy from the sun even after all these years. The water recycling system still worked perfectly, filtering and purifying every drop of moisture. The hydroponics gardens still produced food, enough to keep one person alive indefinitely. Robert had become skilled at everything. He was a mechanic, an engineer, a doctor, a gardener, a cook, and a programmer all rolled into one. He had learned to fix almost anything that broke down. He had studied the old manuals and the digital archives stored in the station's computers. He had learned history, mathematics, literature, and science. He had educated himself completely, with nothing but time and technology to help him. Today, however, was different from all the other days. The weather alerts had warned of a massive sandstorm coming. Robert had seen many sandstorms during his 117 years here, but this one seemed worse than usual. The wind howled with incredible force, and the sand struck the station's walls like tiny bullets, creating a constant pattering sound. Robert had sealed all the exterior hatches and moved to the underground sections where it was safe. As he worked in the maintenance bay, he noticed something unusual happening on the monitors. The sensors were picking up strange readings from the desert floor to the east of the facility. Robert checked the data carefully. Something large was being exposed by the wind and the shifting sand. He watched the sensors intently as the sandstorm continued to rage outside. Whatever this was, the storm was uncovering it, pushing away decades of accumulated sand and dust. When the storm finally passed, Robert suited up and ventured out to investigate. The desert was a different place now, with new dunes formed and old ones flattened. He walked for 30 minutes across the hot sand, following the coordinates from the sensors. His suit protected him from the heat and the radiation, but he could still feel the intensity of the sun above him. Then he saw it. Partially buried in the sand was a metallic pod, perhaps 3 meters long and 1 meter wide. It was covered in rust and dust, but he could still make out markings on its surface. As he got closer, his heart began to race. These were Earth markings. These were human symbols. On the side of the pod was the emblem of Earth's space program, a symbol he had not seen in over a century. Robert carefully dug around the pod and managed to open it. Inside, protected by layers of insulation and protective coating, was a data storage device. It was a message pod, the kind that was designed to survive long periods of time in harsh conditions. His hands trembled as he carried it back to the station. In the laboratory, Robert connected the device to the main computer. Most of the data was corrupted, damaged by time in the harsh desert environment. But slowly, piece by piece, the message began to emerge. The text was fragmentary and incomplete, but Robert read every word carefully. Emergency protocol activated, the message began. Archean Armada defeated in Sector 7. Earth's military forces successful. Coalition of human worlds united. Mission accomplished. All dormant facilities prepare for activation. Activate Prime Genesis engine to ensure humanity's survival advantage. Authorization code Delta 7902. Humanity prevails. Robert stared at the screen in disbelief. The message continued, detailing military victories and human resistance movements. It spoke of a coalition of human worlds that had secretly coordinated a massive counteroffensive against the Archean Empire. It spoke of victories and triumphs. It spoke of humanity fighting back against their oppressors. He read the message again and again, making sure he understood it correctly. Could it be true? Had humanity really defeated the Archeans? Had there really been a secret military effort all this time? The message was dated 50 years ago. It had taken 50 years to reach this station, traveling through the void of space in a sealed pod, waiting to be discovered. Robert's mind raced with possibilities and questions. The Prime Genesis engine was the most powerful machine at this facility. It was the machine he had maintained faithfully for over a century. He had always been told it was a last-resort terraforming device, a contingency to make Kepler-7 habitable for human colonization. But reading between the lines of the message, he understood something else. This machine was a weapon. A world-altering weapon of tremendous power. Robert walked slowly through the station, thinking about what he had learned. The desert stretched endlessly outside, beautiful and terrible. The stars would be coming out soon, tiny points of light in the vast darkness above. For 117 years he had waited. Now, finally, the universe seemed to be calling him again. The question was whether he had the courage to answer. Robert sat in the main control room, staring at the data pod's message for hours. The words seemed to glow on the screen, burning into his mind. Emergency protocol activated. Activate Prime Genesis engine. He had read the message so many times that he could recite it from memory. But understanding what it meant was a completely different matter. The station had an artificial intelligence system called Aria, a voice-based computer program that Robert had talked to for many years. Aria had been designed to assist maintenance workers and provide companionship if needed. Robert activated the system now, needing to hear another voice, even if it was artificial. "Aria, I need your help," Robert said quietly. The speakers crackled to life. "Good afternoon, Robert. How can I assist you today?" Aria's voice was calm and gentle, with a slight electronic quality that reminded Robert of old recordings he had heard in the station's archives. Robert explained everything. He told Aria about the sandstorm, the data pod, and the mysterious message. He read the entire message aloud, word by word. When he finished, he waited for Aria to respond. The silence lasted for several seconds, which seemed like an eternity. "Robert, this is significant," Aria said finally. "The message appears to be authentic. The encryption codes match Earth military protocols from 2 centuries ago. The information is consistent with historical records we have of human Archean conflicts." "Is it possible?" Robert asked. "Could humanity really have won? Could we really have defeated the Archeans?" "Based on available evidence, yes," Aria replied. "The Archeans were superior in technology and organization, but they had significant weaknesses. They underestimated human creativity and adaptability. They did not expect organized resistance. If a coalition of human worlds coordinated their efforts carefully, they could have achieved significant military victories." Robert stood up and walked through the station, his mind churning. He visited the main engine chamber, descending through several levels of corridors and passages. The Prime Genesis engine was enormous, a massive structure that had been built into the bedrock of the planet itself. It stretched deeper than Robert had ever fully explored, extending far below the surface facility. The engine was a marvel of engineering, filled with circuits and processors and systems that Robert only partially understood, even after 117 years of maintenance. He placed his hand on the cool metal surface of the engine. This machine had been his responsibility for so long. He had cleaned it, maintained it, repaired it, and kept it running perfectly. But he had never actually activated it. He had never understood its true purpose. Robert returned to the control room and sat down heavily in the main chair. He thought about his life. He had spent 117 years on this desert world, alone with machines and silence. He had spent 117 years waiting for something that never came. He had spent 117 years maintaining hope, even when hope seemed foolish. But now, suddenly, hope had arrived in the form of a data pod buried in the sand. "Aria," Robert said, "what would happen if I activated the Prime Genesis engine?" There was a long pause. "Robert, I must advise caution. Activating the Prime Genesis engine would have massive consequences. The engine was designed to reshape planetary geology and atmosphere. If activated, it would transform Kepler-7 completely. It would create new geological formations. It would alter the atmospheric composition. It would trigger earthquakes and storms. The entire planet would change." "That's not all it would do, is it?" Robert asked. "No," Aria confirmed. "According to the classified military files in my archives, The Prime Genesis engine has additional capabilities. It is networked to defensive systems buried across this planet, weapons systems, shield generators, satellite weapons platforms, ancient technology designed to protect this world from hostile forces. If activated, the engine would bring all of these systems online simultaneously. Robert felt his heart pounding in his chest. So it's a weapon. Yes, Arya said simply. The Prime Genesis engine is a weapon. A very powerful weapon. It was built during the time of human expansion, when Earth still had the resources and the ambition to create such things. It was designed as a last resort, a way to protect human colonies if they came under attack. Robert stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under the star-filled sky. He could see the Milky Way stretching across the heavens, billions and billions of stars, each one potentially harboring life and civilizations. If I activate the engine, Robert said slowly, the Archeans will know. They monitor this sector. They will detect the activation immediately. They will come here. And they will try to destroy us. That is correct, Arya agreed. However, if the message is accurate, and if Earth's military has truly defeated the Archean armada, then human forces may arrive before the local Archean forces can respond. The engine's activation would serve as a signal, a beacon telling humanity where you are and that you have survived. Robert thought about this. He thought about 117 years of solitude. He thought about the endless days and nights, watching the sun rise and set over the desert. He thought about the weight of silence, the heaviness of being alone. But he also thought about something else. He thought about humanity. He thought about his species, scattered across the stars, fighting for survival against a superior force. He thought about the message in the pod, speaking of victories and triumph. He thought about the possibility that humanity was finally fighting back. If I don't activate the engine, Robert said, nothing changes. I continue my maintenance work. I wait for someone who may never come. I die alone on this desert planet. That is one possibility, Arya said. But if I activate the engine, Robert continued, I become part of something larger. I become part of humanity's fight for survival. Maybe I help turn the tide. Maybe I help save my species. Robert sat down again and looked at the data pod, still connected to the computer terminal. The message glowed softly in the darkness. Arya, Robert said, I need time to think about this. I need to make sure I understand what I would be doing. Of course, Arya replied. Take all the time you need. I will be here whenever you need to talk. Robert sat alone in the control room through the night, watching the stars and thinking about the choice he had to make. For 117 years he had waited. Now, finally, the universe was asking him to do something. The question was whether he had the courage to answer that call. Robert had made his decision. After 3 days of thinking, talking with Arya, and reading every technical document he could find about the Prime Genesis engine, he knew what he had to do. He would activate the machine. He would wake up the weapon that had been sleeping beneath Kepler-7 for 2 centuries. He spent the next week preparing. He made sure all the station systems were secured and backed up. He recorded messages explaining what he was doing and why he was doing it. He left detailed instructions for whoever might find the station after the activation. He wanted to leave a record, a piece of history that would explain his choice. On the final morning, Robert put on his maintenance suit and descended into the deep levels of the facility. The elevator carried him down, down, down through hundreds of meters of rock and reinforced steel. The temperature grew warmer as he descended. The air became thicker. He could hear the humming of enormous machines, the deep sound of power flowing through ancient circuits. The core chamber of the Prime Genesis engine was vast beyond imagination. It was a cathedral of technology, with towering structures of metal and glass reaching up toward a ceiling that seemed impossibly far away. Cables as thick as trees ran across the floor, carrying incredible amounts of electrical power. The walls were covered with glowing panels and displays, showing the status of millions of systems. Robert stood at the entrance to the chamber, taking it all in. This was the most important moment of his life. He was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. Once he activated the engine, there would be no going back. The entire planet would change. Everything would be different. He walked slowly across the chamber floor toward the central control terminal. His footsteps echoed off the hard surfaces, creating an eerie symphony of sound. He could feel the power of the machine all around him, like standing next to an enormous sleeping creature. The control terminal was a simple interface, far simpler than Robert had expected. There was a screen, a keyboard, and a single large button covered in red plastic. Beneath the button were the words, Emergency Activation, written in faded letters. Robert sat down at the terminal and began entering the authorization codes from the data pod. His fingers moved slowly and carefully across the keyboard. He had memorized the codes, but he still double-checked each one. The screen filled with text as the system recognized his inputs. "Welcome, authorized user," a mechanical voice said from the speakers. "Prime Genesis engine standing by. Authorization codes verified. Please confirm activation sequence." Robert took a deep breath. This was it. This was the moment. He reached out and pressed the red button. The engine came to life. It started with a low humming sound, barely audible. Then the humming grew louder, building in intensity until the entire chamber vibrated. The lights on all the panels suddenly blazed to life, illuminating the vast space with brilliant colors. Red, blue, green, and white lights flashed in complex patterns across every surface. Robert could feel the vibration through his suit, through his body, down to his bones. The whole chamber seemed to be thrumming with power. The cables began to glow, carrying enormous amounts of electrical energy from place to place. The screens filled with rapidly changing data, showing systems coming online one after another. "Prime Genesis engine activation sequence initiated," the mechanical voice announced. "All systems coming online. Estimated time to full operational status, 47 minutes. Robert watched as the process unfolded. The engine was waking up after sleeping for 200 years. Piece by piece, system by system, the massive machine was coming back to life. He could hear the sounds of hydraulics moving, of enormous machinery shifting into position far below the chamber. The ground beneath Robert's feet began to shake. He held onto the terminal to keep from falling over. The entire planet was responding to the engine's awakening. Deep beneath the surface, massive structures were moving, repositioning themselves. Robert looked up at the ceiling and gasped. Cracks were forming in the reinforced steel, spreading like lightning across the metal surface. But the cracks were not from damage. They were intentional, opening up to reveal something behind them. The ceiling began to separate, sliding back to expose another layer beneath it. "Defensive systems coming online," the voice said. "Atmospheric processors activated. Geological formation systems activated. Shield generators coming online." Robert rushed to the nearest display panel and watched the data streaming across the screen. He saw readouts from systems he had never even known existed. There were weapons platforms buried across the entire planet, scattered through the bedrock. There were shield generators positioned at strategic points. There were atmospheric processors designed to completely change the composition of Kepler-7's air. He ran back outside the chamber and took the elevator up as quickly as it would go. He needed to get to the observation deck to see what was happening on the surface. When he reached the upper levels and looked out the windows, his breath caught in his throat. The desert was transforming before his eyes. In the distance, the ground was rising, pushing upward as massive structures emerged from beneath the sand. These were not natural formations. These were machines, ancient weapons platforms built by humans 2 centuries ago. The sky itself seemed to be changing. A faint shimmer appeared overhead, like heat waves but more structured, more intentional. The atmospheric processors were at work, beginning their slow process of transforming Kepler-7's atmosphere. "Arya," Robert called out. "Report status." "Prime Genesis engine now at 73% operational," Arya's voice came through the speakers. "All major defensive systems are online. Weapons platforms are active and ready. Shield generators are at full power. Atmospheric processors are beginning transformation sequence. Estimated time to complete planetary transformation, 42 days. Robert watched the desert transform around him. In the sky he could see more shimmer, more changes. The shield that was forming would protect the entire planet. It would create a barrier that the Archeans could not easily penetrate. "The engine is alive," Robert whispered to himself. "Yes," Arya confirmed. "The engine is alive. Kepler-7 is no longer a forgotten world. We are now a fortress. We are ready." Robert stood at the window and watched the transformed world come to life. The 117 years of waiting were over. Everything had changed in a single moment. The planet that had been his prison was now his weapon, and humanity's weapon as well. Whatever came next, Robert knew that he had made the right choice. The alert came exactly 17 hours after the Prime Genesis engine reached full operational status. Robert was in the main control room watching the planet's transformation, when Arya's voice suddenly changed tone, becoming sharp and urgent. "Robert, detecting 3 large ships entering the sector. The ships are Archean dreadnoughts. They are approaching Kepler-7 at high speed. Estimated time of arrival, 6 hours. Robert felt his stomach tighten. He had known this would happen. He had known that activating the engine would draw attention. But knowing something intellectually and experiencing it emotionally were two different things. The Archeans were coming. "Show me," Robert commanded. Arya displayed the data on the main screen. 3 massive ships appeared on the tactical display, represented by small red triangles. They were enormous vessels, each 1 kilometer long. They had weapon systems that could destroy entire cities. They had shields that could withstand nuclear explosions. They were among the most powerful weapons the Archean Empire possessed. But Robert was not afraid. Not yet anyway. The Prime Genesis engine was ready. The shield that protected Kepler-7 was now complete, a shimmering dome of energy that surrounded the entire planet. The weapons platforms scattered across the desert were fully armed and operational. For the first time in his life, Robert had something to fight with. "Arya, run defensive scenarios," Robert said. "Show me what happens when they attack." Data began flowing across the screen. Arya had run thousands of simulations, analyzing every possible outcome. The results were surprising. Against the Archean dreadnoughts, humanity's ancient weapons platforms might actually have a chance. But it would not be easy. The Archean ships were powerful. They had weapons that could damage or destroy the planetary shield. They had shields of their own that were difficult to penetrate. The battle, if it came to that, would be fought on a knife's edge. "They are hailing us," Arya announced suddenly. "The Archean ships are sending a communication." "Put it through," Robert said. A voice filled the control room, cold and emotionless, with an odd mechanical quality. "This is Archean Battle Commander Vex 9 of the Warship Destroyer Class 7. You are operating an unauthorized military installation. You must shut down all systems immediately and submit to Archean authority. Failure to comply will result in the destruction of your facility and the termination of your species." Robert's hands clenched into fists. The Archeans sounded confident, arrogant even. They did not believe that humans could possibly pose a threat to them. They had conquered so many worlds, destroyed so many civilizations. They could not imagine that this small, forgotten outpost could have any real power. "Arya, send a response," Robert said. "Ready," Arya replied. "This is Robert Chin, human maintenance operator of Kepler-7. This planet is now under human protection. The Prime Genesis engine is fully operational. We will not surrender. If you attempt to attack this world, you will face consequences. You have been warned." Robert heard Arya transmit the message. For a long moment there was silence. Then the Archean commander's voice returned, and Robert could have sworn he heard something like laughter in it. "A single human operator believes he can threaten the Archean Empire? This is amusing. We will demonstrate the futility of your resistance. Prepare for attack." The red triangles on the screen suddenly began moving faster, accelerating toward Kepler-7. The dreadnoughts were charging their weapons systems. The battle was about to begin. "All defensive systems, prepare to fire," Robert commanded. His voice was steady but his heart was pounding. The first volley of Archean weapons came screaming down toward the planet. Hundreds of energy bolts, traveling at nearly the speed of light, descended through Kepler-7's upper atmosphere. They struck the planetary shield in a cascade of brilliant explosions, creating flashes of light that were visible from the surface. But the shield held. The ancient human technology absorbed the attack, dissipating the energy across its surface. The planetary shield flickered but remained intact. "Shield holding at 97% power," Arya reported. "Defensive systems returning fire." Massive energy beams shot up from the weapons platforms buried across Kepler-7's desert surface. The beams were thick and powerful, carrying more destructive force than anything the Archeans had faced in centuries. The first beam struck the lead dreadnought directly in its center section. The impact was catastrophic. The Archean ship's shields flared and collapsed. The beam tore through the vessel's hull, creating a massive wound that vented atmosphere and debris into space. The dreadnought's weapons suddenly went silent. "One ship disabled," Arya announced. 2 remaining. The second and third dreadnoughts adjusted their attack strategy. Instead of direct assaults, they began using more sophisticated tactics. They tried to find weaknesses in the planetary shield. They attempted to overwhelm the shield generators with concentrated fire. They launched smaller weapons that moved in erratic patterns, harder to target. But the Prime Genesis engine had been designed by the brightest human minds 2 centuries ago. It had been designed to handle exactly this kind of sophisticated attack. The shield adapted to each new threat. The weapons platforms retarget and fired with perfect precision. The artificial intelligence that controlled the system made millions of calculations per second, predicting enemy movements and responding instantly. The second dreadnought took a massive energy beam through its center. It broke apart, splitting into two halves that drifted apart like pieces of broken rock. Another volley from the weapons platforms caught the final dreadnought, damaging its shield generators and blasting away large sections of its hull. The remaining Archeon vessel is attempting to flee, Arya reported. They are executing an emergency jump into hyperspace. Robert watched as the last red triangle on his screen suddenly vanished. The dreadnought had fled, its commander recognizing that they were outmatched. The Archeans had come expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had found themselves facing the combined might of humanity's ancient military technology. The battle was over in less than 20 minutes. Robert sat back in his chair, breathing heavily. His hands were shaking slightly. 3 massive warships had come to destroy him, and he had defeated them. He had done it. He had actually done it. Arya, damage report, he said quietly. Planetary shield at 84% power. 2 weapons platforms requiring maintenance. No casualty reports. We have suffered no losses, Robert. Robert looked out at the desert through the control room window. The stars were still shining overhead. The transformed landscape stretched out before him, beautiful and terrible at the same time. The Archeans would come back. He knew that. They would send more ships, more forces. But for now, for this moment, humanity had won. And one old man, alone on a desert planet, had turned the tide of war. The first human ship arrived exactly 6 days after the Archeon dreadnoughts fled. Robert was monitoring the sensors when he detected the vessel approaching through space. Unlike the Archeon ships, this one moved slowly and carefully, broadcasting identification signals that matched the Earth military codes stored in the station's archives. Robert's hands trembled as he watched the ship approach. For 117 years, he had been alone on this planet. For 117 years, he had maintained the machines and waited for someone to come. Now, finally, someone was coming. Someone from his own people. The ship was not as large as the Archeon dreadnoughts, but it was impressive nonetheless. It was sleek and modern, built with technology that was centuries newer than anything Robert had ever worked with. The ship matched its velocity with Kepler-7's orbital speed and began to descend toward the planet's surface. They are requesting landing coordinates, Arya informed Robert. They are asking for the primary landing zone near the main facility. Robert quickly prepared the landing zone. He activated the old landing beacon, a system that had not been used in generations. He cleared the area around the facility of any obstacles and made sure the landing pad was in perfect condition. Within an hour, the ship was descending through Kepler-7's atmosphere. Robert put on his best maintenance suit and walked out to the landing zone. The desert heat wrapped around him immediately, even through the protective suit. He stood there watching the sky as the ship descended lower and lower. Finally, the ship touched down on the landing pad with barely a whisper of sound. The landing struts compressed slightly as the vessel settled into place. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a door on the side of the ship opened, and a ramp extended down to the ground. A woman appeared in the doorway. She was young, perhaps only 40 or 50 years old, with short dark hair and the uniform of an Earth military officer. She walked down the ramp slowly as if she could not quite believe what she was seeing. Behind her came a dozen soldiers, all wearing modern armor and carrying advanced weapons. But their weapons were not pointed at Robert. The woman smiled as she approached him. "I am Commander Helen Mitchell," she said, extending her hand in greeting. "I have been sent by Earth Command to make contact with any surviving human installations. I cannot believe you are here. I cannot believe this is real." Robert shook her hand. He wanted to speak, but his voice seemed to have forgotten how to work. After 117 years of solitude, talking to another human being felt almost impossible. "I am Robert Chin," he finally managed to say. "I have been maintaining this facility for a very long time." Helen's eyes widened. "Robert Chin? That name is in the station records from 200 years ago. That would make you." She did not finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. 160 years old, Robert said simply. "The medical systems kept me alive. I waited here. I maintained the machines. And then I received your message." Helen's expression changed. Her eyes became intense, focused. "You activated the Prime Genesis engine, did you not? We detected the activation signal 5 days ago. We have been following the signal across the void. That is how we found this world." "Yes," Robert said. "I activated it. The Archeans came. But we defeated them. The old weapons worked. The shield held. Humanity won. Helen looked away toward the horizon, where the transformed landscape of Kepler-7 stretched out endlessly. The new forests that were growing as a result of the atmospheric processors were visible in the distance, patches of green amid the traditional red and orange of the desert. You did more than defeat them, Helen said quietly. You did more than protect this world. That activation signal, that beacon you sent out into the void, it gave us hope. It told us that humanity was still alive, that we still had weapons we could use, that we could actually fight back against the Archeans. More ships began arriving over the next few days. First came military vessels, then transport ships carrying soldiers and supplies. Then came civilian ships, bringing colonists and families who wanted to settle on this newly transformed world. The abandoned outpost that had been Robert's prison for 117 years suddenly became the center of a massive human presence. Helen took Robert on a tour of the new installations being established around the planet. She showed him the military bases being constructed, the factories being built to manufacture weapons and supplies, and the settlements where families were beginning to live. Kepler-7 was transforming from a forgotten desert world into the greatest human stronghold in known space. You should be proud, Helen told Robert as they stood on a hillside overlooking a new settlement. Your actions changed everything. When Earth learned that Kepler-7 was operational and that its weapons had defeated 3 Archean dreadnoughts, it changed the entire war. It gave people hope. It gave commanders confidence that they could actually win against the Archeans. Robert looked out over the transformed landscape. What happened to the other outposts? He asked. There were other human facilities scattered across the Empire. Are they still there? Yes, Helen said. And we are reactivating them one by one. We are finding old maintenance workers like you, people who have been waiting all these years for someone to come back. We are bringing them into the fight. We are rebuilding human civilization. Over the following months, Kepler-7 became a hub of human activity. Scientists arrived to study the Prime Genesis engine and learn how it worked. Engineers came to maintain and upgrade the ancient human technology. Artists and musicians came to celebrate humanity's resurgence. Families came to build new homes and new lives. Robert stayed at the original facility, working with the new arrivals to maintain the Prime Genesis engine and the vast network of systems that protected Kepler-7. But he was no longer alone. He had colleagues now, people to talk to, people to work with. Sometimes in the evening, Robert would stand on the observation deck and look out at the stars. He would think about his 117 years of solitude, about the endless days and nights when he had been completely alone. He would remember the weight of silence, the heaviness of isolation. But then he would look at the lights of the new settlements, at the activity of thousands of people working together to rebuild human civilization. He would listen to the sounds of human voices, to laughter and conversation and argument and debate. And Robert Chin, the last maintenance worker of a forgotten world, would smile. He had waited for 117 years. He had maintained his faith in humanity. And finally, his waiting had ended. The new dawn had come.